52-game preseason is in the books, and it's finally time for the real season. Don't miss out on any of the NBA playoff action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in tournament through the finals, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered with same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's code JOHN, John, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
All right, welcome in. We are live, officially live. John Middlekauff, former NFL scout. You've heard him on 3 and Out podcast. And so far, my big takeaway coming into this draft was J.J. McCarthy was being overvalued. That was my big takeaway. So the Giants, Diana Rossini reporting that the New York Giants were in on Drake Maye or nobody. So for people just tuning in, everybody's watching this. Caleb, Jayden, Drake Maye, no big surprise. Marvin Harrison 4. Falcons go, holy moly. That is interesting. We've had our first big surprise. This is live, by the way. Michael Penix Jr. going to Atlanta at 8. Oh, that's interesting. Well, what they're saying is Kirk Cousins is going to be a 2-year player, a 1-year player. By the way, how lucky is Penix? That O-line, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, 2 backs. How lucky is Michael Penix?
Wow, that's shocking. I think just because a lot of people, I knew scouts during the season that had Penix as a second rounder. I thought that was crazy, but there was a lot of talk a couple months ago that he was not a top 15 pick. And then to go to Atlanta after they just spent all that money on Cousins, they're also getting a guy coming off a torn Achilles, right? Who's not a great athlete. So I completely understand what they're doing. Maybe there's doubling. I mean, they're not. Maybe they are doubling down on the quarterback position. They feel good about their defense. They've drafted 75 offensive skill guys these last couple of years. Their offensive line's good. Hard for me to hate.
How about this? Raheem Morris was an NFL coach, couldn't get the quarterback right, got fired. Goes to the Rams, becomes incredibly great friends with Sean McVay. And Sean McVay made it very clear, dude, we had Goff and moved off. So if Raheem Morris, who's a really smart guy, learned something, as McVay's best friend, you can't be good enough or deep enough at quarterback. We had Goff and we moved off. And so I think this is Raheem Morris saying, listen, this is what I love about this move. A lot of these defensive coaches can struggle with how urgent is quarterback. This is like when Washington had a chance to go out and get people and Ron Rivera wouldn't make the move. Raheem's like, listen, I'm not only going to get Kirk Cousins with this stacked offense, I'm getting his backup. So I got to be honest, I like the move.
Think about this. Raheem Morris had a front row seat as the coordinator 2 years ago when Stafford went down and they were completely fucked, right? I mean, it derailed their season. So you're signing a guy to a lot of money who's a really good player when he was healthy, but he's coming off a torn Achilles. And think about one of their guys in Green Bay just benefited a lot from having a young quarterback on the roster when the Rodgers things got weird. They didn't skip a beat, and now they're a team that everyone's going to love. So this is the old Ron Wolf thing. And Andy followed it. I mean, all these Kyle Shanahan guys, just draft these quarterbacks. You could argue, if you're all in on Kirk Cousins this year trying to win, take a defensive player, especially a defensive lineman. Their sack production's been terrible. That's why a lot of people thought they would take an edge rusher or the Texas defensive tackle. But if you're going to go off the beaten path at this position, this guy's good, Colin. I mean, listen, he got hurt a lot, but he has not been hurt the last 2 years. To me, I love this guy. The one concerning thing is when he did play Michigan, who turned out was an NFL team, they were rattling him and he was way off. But that is a one-game scenario. He has a large body of work. No one throws a better deep ball. No one, just I would say start to finish this last 2 years, probably has had a better 2-year stretch. Jayden had a better season this year. Caleb had a better season last year. Same with Drake Maye. But over the 2-year body of work, you'd have to say Penix was the best, right?
Yeah, and I also think a lot of big game experience. I've defended him on Michigan. You know, my takeaway is a lot of NFL quarterbacks faced Alabama and Nick Saban and looked awful. A lot of NFL quarterbacks can face Georgia over the last 4 years and not look very good. I mean, CJ Stroud couldn't beat Michigan either. So, I mean, they had a stacked deck, one of the most talented teams in the last decade.
Listen, and I'm a Michael Penix fan. He's one of my favorite players in this draft. I think the concerning part about it specifically, though, is right. He was sacked 11 times during the season. He had one of the best offenses, so he never got touched. So he played in somewhat of a situation like a lot of the Ohio State and Alabama guys have over their career, where it's a pretty unreal situation with awesome wide receivers, and he dominated. And then they started getting pressure. They started hitting him. And it's not like he's small. Like I don't view him as slight, quite like Jayden Daniels. But you were at the Oregon game up in Seattle, that Michigan game. A couple of times you're like, is he going to be able to get up? That's the one. Now, get a little bigger. He doesn't have to play right away. Is he immediately one of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL? I mean, he's making he's making $6-7 million. Seems like a pretty good deal.
He's the most talented backup in the NFL, officially. We can go with that. He throws a gorgeous ball. By the way, the Joe Alt pick by the Chargers, this morning I did a mock draft. Until 8:30 in the morning, I had the Chargers taking Joe Alt. I said, Harbaugh's just going to take the best tackle. And then I talked myself out of it for J.C. Latham, who Tennessee took, the best right tackle in the draft. I thought, no, he's got Slater at left. And so I talked myself out. Alex, one of my producers on the herd on FS1, can back me on this. I had Joe Alt till 8:30, and I said, he's going to go get a right tackle. But Latham, you know, I can see Harbaugh just saying, just get me the best tackle. We'll figure out where to play him. Plus, Slater had an injury before. If Slater goes down, Joe Alt's a natural left tackle. So, and the thing about Alt is he's super athletic. He was a high school tight end and defensive end. Brian Kelly told me the other day on the show, their only concern was could they put weight on him? He was just so athletic. We're like, can we get him to 310? We're not sure we could. So Alt's not a bulldozer, but he's really nimble, really athletic, and just he's a house. But he's one of those guys with good feet. It's like the man upstairs does not give you a lot of 6'8", 320-pound guys with great feet, and Joe Alt's that guy.
Never bought. Now, who knows? I guess if Arizona had traded and someone taken a quarterback there and Harrison was also on the board, anyone that's watched Jim Harbaugh operate for 15, 20 years, he wants to play defense and run the football. And he you know, for a former 15-year captain comeback quarterback, if you talk to anyone in the NFL, they're like, he's really more like an offensive lineman than he is a former quarterback. He gave that long kind of diatribe at the owners' meetings about the importance of that group. They already have the left tackle. The one concerning part is, doing my research, you know, he's never played right tackle in college. Sometimes when a guy makes a transition with your feet, it can mess you a little up. But I mean, I'm not even taking an educated guess here. I bet Jim loves that his father was an NFL player. You saw the size when they hugged of those two men. Jim has to just be really excited. You get his GM from Baltimore, big physical guys. We all know the way that he's going to want to look at the people he chose. There were 4 question marks with the Chargers: Bosa, Mack, and the 2 wide receivers. He found a way to keep the 2 pass rushers, and he got rid of the 2 wide receivers. I don't think that's by coincidence. Do you?
No, and Chicago, Caleb Williams at 1. They just picked Rome Odunze, so back-to-back Huskies at 8 and 9. Chicago goes with another receiver. I got to tell you something. I thought they'd go defense here. I thought they would trade down or go defense. So Matt Eberflus, I figured he would pound the table because they have a great corner in Montez Sweat. I figured he'd pound the table for the edge rusher. But right now, look at this. We don't have a defensive player through 9 picks. Has the world changed in this league? So Rome Odunze, who to me, he is the most like there's just nothing. He did combine. He's productive. One of the things as a Husky fan, he got better every year. Like he made a noticeable leap. He has not plateaued. The thing that was interesting, a lot of people thought the Jets would get a receiver, but Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady don't like young receivers. So I just don't see it. I just don't see it. So Rome Odunze goes to the Bears. Watched him live. Watched 15 of his games. I like the pick.
I was texting with a buddy who's a wide receiver coach in the NFL and is one of the better ones. And clearly, most people in some order had Neighbors or Harrison and Neighbors. Rome was the clear 3 guy. And my question to him was, who's the best character guy, in terms of the wiring off the field? And his response was Rome, and it's not close. And those type guys, because there are some question marks with his speed. And this guy said that there's a big difference in just pure speed, which Neighbors is faster than them all, and your ability to run routes and get open. And that's not a problem with Rome. The other thing is he's wired a lot. Like, and this guy compared him to Devontae, very serious, is all in on football, will do whatever it takes. The Bears clearly, what they're looking for from a character standpoint, we've all been saying for a while, and I don't even think it's debatable at this point, there has never been a better situation, at least in my life, for a number 1 quarterback to go to in terms of his roster. So now he's got Keenan Allen, DJ Moore that are established high-end players. You add a receiver in the top 10. You have a good defense with some Pro Bowl level guys. What more can most guys go? Bryce Young, Carolina, Trevor Lawrence, Jacksonville. I mean, it usually is even Peyton Manning, right? They barely won 3 games. This guy goes to a team. It is not inconceivable if Caleb is just solid immediately. Are they a 10-win team?
Yeah, no, I think you have to feel this is the best day for the Chicago Bears since the Super Bowl win in the mid-'80s. This is a tremendous day for them. Now, by the way, we have a trade. The Jets and the Vikings have flipped. The Vikings at 11 have moved up to 10. The Jets at 10 have moved to 11. That would probably signal Minnesota's not going to mess around. They're going to go with a quarterback. My guess would be they don't need anything else offensively. Maybe there's an edge rusher, but they accumulated. The one team, even in my mock draft today on FS1, the one team I had moving up in the top 12 was Minnesota. They accumulated that second pick. My thing here is they're not going to mess around. They're probably going to go get J.J. McCarthy, who I said this. Whoever Minnesota drafts at quarterback will succeed. I didn't care who it was. It didn't matter if it was Penix, Bo Nix. My least favorite quarterback of all these guys is J.J. McCarthy, but I think now he'll be very successful because he doesn't even have to play. I talked to an executive about a month ago. He said he needs to sit. He maybe Thanksgiving year 1, but he's not ready to play right now. You don't go from that Michigan situation to running around. It's a big, big leap. Whereas Drake Maye ran for his life in college at times, he may run for his life in New England. Like, he's used to that stuff. So, and the Jets moved back. By the way, the Jets probably, do we know if they got a 2nd-round pick for that? A 4th and a 5th. Okay, Jets want picks. Yeah. That's what they want. It's a deep draft in the wide receivers.
They don't have a 2nd-rounder,
4th and a 5th.
right?
No, but they want receivers and tight ends, and you can get those in the 4th round and on. So, so let's, in review, Caleb, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye, Marvin Harrison, no surprises, top 4. Joe Alt, a bit of a surprise, though a big physical player, not a surprise. I was told the Chargers wanted to trade down. I was also told they were not getting what they wanted. Malik Neighbors, basically, Diana Rossini reported that the Giants were Drake Maye or bust. All right, the Vikings have picked J.J. McCarthy. I said it a month ago. I said it 2 weeks ago. It's the furnished apartment for any of these quarterbacks. Add some water and Diet Cokes. You're set in the fridge. He's going to sit behind Darnold. I think with Darnold, they're a decent team. Do you?
I do. I mean, I like Sam Darnold. Obviously, so does Kyle Shanahan. He knows a thing or two about football, and it looks like Kevin O'Connell does as well. So I'm always a big believer in, like, who likes you, who believes in you, and the right guys are in on this guy. It's like, yeah, the Adam Gase thing happened, but that was a long time ago, and I'm not sure Adam Gase is in the league now. So when I look at J.J. McCarthy, the thing that concerns me is my comp for him was Alex Smith. And with Alex Smith, everything had to go right, and it took a while. Now, like you said,
that's right. Including the coach.
He gets to go to this furnished apartment. It's a lot easier. It's a turnkey place. So it's unlike a lot of places where if he would have gone to New England, I like Drake Maye. He's more of my type player, high ceiling guy, because we all talked about the Adam Schefter tweet. Half these guys are not going to be that good, and some of it's going to be out of their control. Whoever New England took, I was out on. That organization, the young son now running it. He's the first guy you see on top of Elliott Wolf. I'm out. And I think Drake Maye is going to have a very rough time. My thing with J.J. McCarthy is he falls under Alex Smith. More Alex Smiths turn into Kenny Pickett's and Mac Jones than they do Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
And here's the thing with Kirk Cousins. He was a mid-round pick. So there was a lot less pressure on you. Or Brock Purdy, 7th round pick. when you take more limitations with talent. Now, I do think JJ is probably more talented than Alex, little worse athlete, little better arm, but everything has to go perfect. Now, like you said, they're pretty loaded at wide receiver. They have a good offensive line. And they have an offensive head coach who's the play caller, so he has a lot of advantages. And with Sam, assuming it goes well, like there's going to be a little pressure on them too, and that division's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bears are going to be good. We know the Packers are good, and the
But
Lions are a powerhouse.
The good thing, though, there really isn't a great defense. The Giants' defense or the Bears' defense is good, but it's mostly an offensive division. So, like Sam Darnold, when he went to the AFC East, faced at a time Brian Flores, Bill Belichick, and Sean
Ate him
McDermott.
alive.
It's like, that's a lot. This division is, Lions defense, Packers defense. Frankly, I think it's a well-run organization. When was the last great Packers defense? I feel like I always feel like they underachieve on defense, but they're always formidable on offense. So it's an offensive division. The Bears have I think they have a Eberflus, Montez Sweat, two nice corners. But I don't think it's the Ravens. I don't think it's the Chiefs.
I do think you need to factor in, and I do this too, is you got to be careful in the draft about playing time and experience. And because of what happened in 20, all these guys got the extra year. Jayden Daniels had a huge advantage over guys like Drake Maye and J.J. McCarthy, whose high school seasons were wiped out, right? I mean, these guys are very, very young. Even Caleb, very, very young players. Like, we got a pretty good idea what Michael Penix Jr. is, right? I mean, he's like 23, 24 years old, and it's good. And same thing with Jayden Daniels, who's a little more of a one-year wonder. J.J. McCarthy, just a couple-year starter, 21 years old. Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, same thing. So part of the thing with the draft prospect is it's not about 2024. It's really about the next 5 years and ideally a second contract. So I think they're kind of betting on the growth. And he gets to go to a good spot. But here's where I give Minnesota credit, and maybe just fell this way because they got a lot of no's, is mortgaging a couple first-round picks and next year's one for J.J. McCarthy that's insanity, right? That's awful business in any industry. They really just had to trade a couple mid-round picks to get up a pick to end up getting him. So the value on him, I think it ended up playing in their favor. Do you agree with that? Like they didn't give a haul again. Like I would take Drake, but Drake is off the board. So they didn't the first three quarterbacks, obviously the Bears and even Washington, they weren't talking deals. And even New England, because their owner is desperate to get everyone to stop talking shit about the Crafts, was like, you get Drake Maye in here, and now all anyone's talking about Drake Maye. So you're really getting the third or fourth quarterback off the board. And then Atlanta kind of comes in from the top rope out of nowhere and takes Penix. Who knows if they would have taken Penix over JJ? Maybe they just like JJ the whole time.
Well, it's interesting. Atlanta likes Penix over J.J. McCarthy, it looks like. I mean, that's
sure.
clearly what the decision they made. He throws a much better deep ball. So, I mean, I think the big surprise through 10 picks is that Penix is higher valuation than J.J. McCarthy, who everybody had. I didn't buy it. I don't. I think literally J.J. McCarthy succeeds in one place, and he landed.
Let's do this exercise. Flip the two quarterbacks on the two teams. If you put Penix on Michigan, they're better. At worst, they're the same. And if you put J.J. McCarthy on Washington, there's no way they're in the national championship game. Zero chance. They'd be good. I mean, they'd win 9 games, but they don't beat Oregon twice. And they're just not in the national championship game. No chance.
That's how I feel. So no big surprises yet. There was discussions today about the Rams moving up potentially to the Bears to get Brock Bowers. There's a lot of talk about this. It's interesting because from what I know about the Rams is that they have a first, a second, and 2/3. They feel they have 5 needs, and those are 4 good picks. By the time they have 2 fifths, but by the time you get to the fifths, most of the NFL guys I've talked to think it's a good draft through 5 rounds. Late 5th round.
A lot of guys went back to school, so it hurt the depth.
Yeah, so there's not a ton of depth. It's a really, really good draft early, quarterback, tackle, edge rusher, but mid-5th, late 5th, it gets a little wonky. So the Rams have a bunch of 6th-round picks. I think they want to get out of that space and get another 5th. They give up all their 6th and a 7th. So I do think when I heard today the Rams would move up, I was surprised because I thought they were going to move back to get a fourth-round pick. So I'm interested to see what the New York Jets do here. It's coming any second. So what does this tell you with the Jets taking time? There's some discussion in the room. Like they're probably I think they like Brock Bowers. That's my guess. But Aaron's never been great with young targets. But Greg Cosell told me today Brock Bowers does some things better than anybody in 44 years covering the draft on film. His ability to transition from like pre-catch to post-catch after the ball in his hands. He said there's no transition. He's running full speed before and full speed after. There's just no transition. So
I think he's one of the best players in the draft when you just factor in he went to Georgia in the height of their talent and dominated immediately. And it's not like he's a Southern guy. They got him out of Napa, California, which last I checked isn't exactly producing Bosa brother type talents. And I'm sure he just annihilated those guys in practice every day. They take him.
Okay, Jets take a tackle. I think this is the prudent, smart thing to do. Olu Fashanu, Penn State. Don't believe he allowed a sack this year for Penn State. He's not a dominant run blocker. He's not real physical. But I like this pick by the Jets. I said this. If Aaron Rodgers starts 17 games, the Jets will be viable. Period. Make the O-line the priority. If Aaron Rodgers gets a great receiver, it doesn't mean anything if he's on his ass. I don't care. So I like this pick by the Jets. This is the responsible pick to me. You bring in a guy who's an excellent pass blocker, mediocre run blocker. You add some physicality. I like the pick. It's a grown-up pick to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy route would have been to take Bowers and to put all your chips in the middle of the table and just pray your two tackles stay healthy. But I think we have enough evidence with their offensive line that by no means can Joe Douglas and these guys prepare for that situation, that you just get 16 out of 17 games from Morgan Moses and Smith. I also think, though, if those guys do stay healthy, here's the problem, Colin. If they do stay healthy, you're getting really nothing out of your first-round pick in a year where they kind of are. I mean, if they don't make the playoffs, everyone's getting fired. And this Aaron Rodgers is one of the biggest debacles of all time, given, I mean, the best thing he did for them if they don't make the playoffs is giving them a discount, right? He took $30 million off his contract, but they traded a first-round pick. They traded a second-round pick. Last year, they sucked. I'm out. Like, I'm out on them this year. I mean, their whole team is full of guys that are a hamstring, Achilles, and a pulled muscle away from missing a ton of games. And then all their history, including the linchpin of the whole thing, who's a 40-year-old guy coming off Achilles. I don't care how much ayahuasca he's sucking down and stretching he's doing. I just, you and I talked about it. The moment he got hurt, it was pretty clear. If you just watch those couple snaps, he's not quite as fast. And this was before the Achilles as he once was. And remember the year with Green Bay, they got better the following year when they got Jordan Love. So I get it. Like from a football standpoint, 100% the right move. 2024, little risky. He's thinking the big picture. I give him credit for that, but he might not be around to. This was also a player who a lot of people thought was going to come out last year and be a top 15 pick, went back to school, and just turns out there were a lot of other good tackles in the draft. So this is it's fair to say a blue chip level prospect for the last 18 months in NFL circles.
Yeah, the last two picks, it's interesting. The first 7 picks will all play, I would think, immediately. Penix may sit for a year. McCarthy will sit for a year. Olu Fashanu will play some this year. How much he starts, I'm not sure. But I will say this, first time in NFL history, top 10 was all offense. And as of right now, the top 11's all offense, as Denver's on the clock at 12, Raiders at 13. So I think this is something I've been ad nauseum on for years, probably irritating people. The last 10 coaches that have made the Super Bowl have all been offense. I think this is exactly what the draft should be. Unless you have a great edge rusher in Aiden Hutchinson, Dallas Turner's a really good edge rusher. I think Jared Verse, honestly, was the most dominant I saw when I saw him play. I thought he really jumped off the tele. I thought Dallas Turner was your classic, Alabama athlete. I thought Jared Verse was actually the best edge rusher. When I watched him, now this may have been the ACC competition against Florida State, but I watched him and you're like, oh, nobody can block. He's just way better than competition. A lot of that just SEC has NFL tackles. Maybe the ACC doesn't. But, Sean Payton, now my guess is I know he likes Bo Nix. But here's the problem. If it's a reach, fine, but the Raiders at 13 need a quarterback. They like Jayden and Penix, and they're both off the board. So 12 and 13 are fascinating. In division, both need a quarterback. I think Denver's I'm gonna guess Bo Nix here. I think in that division with Harbaugh, Herbert, Reed, Mahomes, you gotta take a swing here. To me, that's what it feels like. And their O-line, by the way, Peyton built that thing in 1 year. It was top 7 by PFF. So you don't have a need there. Mims and Cortland Sutton, you can get a receiver later. They need an edge rusher and a quarterback for the future. I think their roster's okay. It's not great, but it's okay.
I think taking Bo Nix in the first round is pretty nuts. But the way he wants to play, let's face it, Drew Brees the last couple years, when they were successful in the late teens, like 17, 18, was not bombing the ball down the field by any means. Get rid of the ball fast, get rid of the ball accurately. And Sean Payton sneaky's kind of got a little old school Bill Parcells. He will run the ball once he got Alvin Kamara. So could you just function immediately? Because let's look at their quarterback room right now. It's Jared Stidham and Zach Wilson and DiNucci. I mean, you if that's your quarterback room going into the season, I don't care if Sean Payton turns into Bill Walsh. I mean, is that a 6-win team at best? You'd be in major trouble.
It's rough.
So I just call it, I don't know, Bo Nix. I mean, it's same thing with J.J. McCarthy. Before this quarterback inflation of the Mahomes and Josh Allen's hitting, I think those type players historically have all gone after pick 50 forever. And I get it. You could say homes we're all living in now used to be $400,000 and now they're $1.5 million. It is what it is. The difference is you got a place to live. The quarterback, the pressure immediately. You see these guys just flame out so fast. And I had a take the other day, like, I understand you get offered $90 million. I don't care if you're already rich. It's hard to turn down. But you have to wonder if the way this thing is played out, and we could all see it coming. You said from the beginning, like, I don't think him and Russell are ever going to work. And he's never going to be a bad enough coach to be drafting in the top 1 or 2. Like, even if his team sucks, he'll still find a way to draft somewhere between like 9 to 14. It was a tough job the moment he took it. And I do think money overwhelmed him, but I wonder if he regrets it.
Okay, I could see Sean here just saying, screw it. I'm taking Brock Bowers. I got Cortland Sutton's my 1. Mims will be my 2. I like Williams, the running back. I'm just going to take the best player available. And I don't think there's any question. Brock Bowers is the best player available. I don't think that would be crazy. Wow. Denver. Okay, they reached. So Bo Nix. I'll tell you what, Brock Bowers is the best player. I mean, somebody's getting a star. And I know the Rams want him, so the Rams have to now be thinking about, do we just move up to the Raiders? So Bo Nix to Denver. Well, okay. Well, again, they need a quarterback. Listen, here's the thing. I saw him play live twice. Here's what I liked about him. He's more athletic than you think.
Well, he's a good athlete.
Really good athlete. Little Alex Smith, like Alex gets on the run. You're like, oh, Alex can outrun linebackers. Alex is fast. Bo can move. Bo's got 61 starts. The Oregon offense, to some degree, is Drew Brees's. I'm going to design a play with 2 options. Throw it to it. So remember, Bo doesn't throw a good deep ball. Brees last 5 years, he didn't throw a great deep ball. So my take is, Sean talks himself into, listen, I won with Sean, who was the best quarterback in the league with no deep ball the last 4 years. Let's be honest. Patrick Mahomes no longer throws a deep ball. The deep ball is great if you have Tyreek Hill and a handful of receivers. Not a lot of teams are throwing the deep ball consistently. If you have A.J. Brown, it's great. Most teams don't have A.J. Brown. There's a lot of good teams in this league, John, that don't have an over-the-top
49ers never throw the ball
Kansas
deep.
City's ever. And they're looking to move Ayuk. So my take on Bo Nix is he's a young Breeze. And you could say, well, that's ridiculous. But Price, the guy's been to the SEC. The Pac-12 was the best it's been in 20 years. He was very good.
He was awesome.
High completion percentage.
I feel like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth because we always talk about the importance of the wiring and the character and all that stuff about Bo Nix. People love what he kind of became at Oregon, the way they talk about him. I also think you got to be careful when you're evaluating the player. of falling in love with that. And clearly Sean puts a premium on it. I mean, he spent 15 years around one of the highest character guys in like league history in Drew Brees. And that's where, again, you get back to the Kenny Pickett's, those type players, the Mac Jones, where you fall in love with the character and the physical attributes. Is this also as simple as they were desperate? I mean, like we just talked about before they made the pick. What were they going to do? Roll into the season with DiNucci and Zach Wilson? I mean, they didn't have a choice. they really did. And the good thing is with Stidham, I mean, Zach Wilson's not even a lock to make the team. He's got to beat out DiNucci. Bo Nix, people are going to want him to start week 1, but there's no guarantee. You don't have to do it right away if you don't feel he's ready, right?
Here's John. Michael Penix went at 8. People had him in the second round.
That's crazy.
So people say, well, Bo Nix is a reach. Michael Penix at 8 is the shock of the draft. A lot of us thought Bo Nix would go to Denver. Nobody thought Penix is going
especially
8.
to Atlanta. If you told me before the draft Michael Penix went 8, I thought the Raiders would have traded up to 8 to get him because they were pretty desperate. That's what I did in my little mock draft. I also think, though, a little different than last time because actually very similar. Okay, 5 quarterbacks went in the top 12. Mac Jones' year, 5 quarterbacks went in the top 15. Quarterbacks went 1, 2, 3. And beside Trevor Lawrence, all those quarterbacks are on different teams. Little bit different, right? That draft was coming into a season when the season was all fucked up. Trey didn't even have a season. The Big Ten just played conference opponents. Half the games didn't even happen. But and these guys have played a lot more football than that crew. But we do have a recent example. Well, 5 quarterbacks went really high in the draft, and 4 of them were traded before year 4 started. One of them didn't even make it the 3rd year, and Trey Lance was traded before the start of the season. The other 2, the other 3, I mean, the teams couldn't trade fast enough. They just couldn't get anything for it. They not only traded, Colin, 3 of them went for 6-round picks. So it's not like, well, something happened. I mean, they went for nothing. So
downstairs.
It just shows you the Schefter tweet, 46% of these quarterbacks,
right outside the door.
Only 46 get a second contract. I actually think that number is going to keep kind of staggering around there or even going below it, given the amount of guys coming in. Right. Some of these guys are not only not going to work, it's going to be really, really bad. Now, you would say Kevin O'Connell, J.J. McCarthy, you'd want an offensive coach. Bo Nix, Sean Payton. Like part of Mac Jones was he had Belichick and Patricia, right? So it was, Justin Fields, who might not be any good, had a weird situation. Trey Lance, Kyle just turned on him early because he wasn't good enough. And Zach Wilson also, same thing. Character, I would say, was a defining spot for, I mean, Mac Jones turned out to be pretty immature, couldn't handle it. And same thing, Zach Wilson was completely overwhelmed. These guys are very high character, at least when you talk to NFL people. They feel very good about this group's wiring and off the field stuff.
Also, this group of quarterbacks has multiple years starting. Huge advantage. The other thing is the less talented guys, J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix, go to offensive coaches. Yeah. The more talented guys, Caleb, Jayden, and Drake, go to defensive coaches. So generally a more talented guy will be able to overcome more issues. J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix are not going to a defensive old school coach and winning in this league. But you start looking at McCarthy and Bo Nix with Kevin O'Connor and Sean Payton. And by the way, Minnesota's stacked. And I'll make this argument. I think Denver's actually got good players. I like a running back. Bowles is a great left tackle. I thought Sean did a great job to upgrade the offensive line. Cortland Sutton, Mims. So I think Denver needs, they need an edge rusher and a couple of weapons, but I don't think Denver is without talent. I don't. And I think Russell may be worse than we think.
I would say this too, the division, the Chargers have a long way to go talent-wise, but they upgraded. They couldn't have upgraded anymore with the coach. The Chiefs.
Okay, the Raiders took Brock Bowers. Okay, so best player on the board.
There's a lot of talent in that division. That's the one thing I would say. There's high-end coaching. There's a lot of talent. And clearly Denver and Vegas are looking up, right? The Chiefs are the cream of the crop, and it's going to be hard not to like the Chargers immediately with Jim Harbaugh to compete to win, 9-10 games immediately?
Well, they had Darren Waller a couple years ago. He left. He may retire. So you have Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers. That's a quarterback room right now with Gardner Minshew. Now, Minshew put up big numbers with Shane Steichen. take a deep breath. He's not going to put up those numbers. Shane Steichen is different. He is as sharp as any young offensive coach. Antonio Pierce is a rookie defensive coach. They're going to be more of I think they're going to be more physical football team, a different culture entirely than Indianapolis. But Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers for Gardner Minshew, those are real weapons. Those are elite.
I will say this about the Raiders. Quarterback, major concern, question mark, and they don't have one. They have a lot of high-end players. I mean, Devontae's
at the right
spots. Max Crosby, elite. Colton Miller, high-end. Bowers, to me, is one of my favorite players in this draft and one of the more talented tight ends in a long time to come out. Obviously, they did lose the running back to Green Bay, but they got talent. There's no doubt about that. It's just quarterback. What are you going to do? Play with O'Connell and Gardner Minshew against Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert?
So my guess is the Raiders will absolutely be in play for Michael Pratt from Tulane, the quarterback. They'll absolutely
might be their second-round pick
because he's the one. Yeah, to me, he is the one guy after the first round that when I watch him, I think, he's your classic second-round quarterback. Andy Dalton is the comp. There's nothing you look at, arm, size, mobility, and go, wow. But you look at him and think, well, he's a better version of Brock Purdy. He's a bigger hands, bigger kid, a little bit better athlete than a Brock Purdy. Now, they don't have those weapons, but you don't have to have, let's be honest, cognitive ability, tons of college starts. That can win you games in the NFL. This is a kid with 4 years, didn't transfer, got some offers, I imagine, transfer portal, stayed in Tulane, and did not have great players around him, so therefore had to elevate other players in kind of a mediocre program, which was, a mess when he got there. So I saw him play against USC, talented kid. So I think the Raiders go for a quarterback in round 2, and I don't hate that.
The last time they got a 9-year starter in the second round named Derek Carr. They would die for Derek. So you can find, a lot of the second round historically has kind of been a sweet spot. Andy Dalton, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo. You can get guys that don't have the hype, usually smaller school guys, a lot of production, kind of a sweet spot to get a guy that flies a little under the radar that we don't talk about as much leading up to the draft, but in NFL circles.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing, Colin.
Right.
How many teams now with Broncos off the board, Minnesota off the board, teams that are desperate to get a quarterback? Think how many teams in the NFL have like established starting quarterback. Maybe Seattle's a team to keep an eye on in the second round that could trade it. But there aren't that many teams at this. New England desperate. They got one. Washington got one. There are a lot less teams right now to worry about in that second, third round. If you really like a guy, it might even behoove you to kind of trade up and get aggressive just to make sure you get it because you never know. But who are you really competing against at this point in time?
5, 6. God, 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12 picks. How the world has changed. So the Saints are on the clock. Saints need a tackle. So my guess is they get the Oregon State kid.
Good player.
Yeah, good player. So I know I think the Saints will go offensive tackle. That kind of seems fairly predictable. You know what? The Bo Nix Denver thing. I love that.
I think one of the things to keep an eye on right now is would the Colts are at 15, right? And the Jags, I think, are at 17. Would either one of those teams, with some of these, I guess there are still some good wide receivers on the board, would they like one of those wide receivers, or would they be willing to talk with the 49ers about trading for Brandon Ayuk? Because these wide receivers, Colin, these contracts, all these guys are getting $30 to $32 million a year. And the 49ers, the way they operate their offense, you can't pay a guy $30 million a year to get 75 catches. St. Brown got $28 million a year. He catches 120 balls a year. So it's part of it. There has to be some return on investment. Now, the problem is if I'm bulky or I'm Chris Ballard, I would rather have the wide receiver at pick 15 because he cost me $3 or $4 million a year for 4 years. So that goes into the equation too. But there's been a lot of smoke because I cannot envision the 49ers paying Brandon Ayuk that contract. He's just the way they operate their offense, it doesn't make sense.
No, and it doesn't. And they also, first of all, he's been public with his anger. Organizations don't. Wide receiver, there's a term. It's not diva linebacker. It's diva receiver. So once they get verbal, once there's volume with a disgruntled receiver, it's like a big man in the NBA. Once they're hurt early, they're hurt often.
Yeah.
Embiid gets hurt early. It's the same thing with disgruntled receivers. If they're verbal early, they're verbal often. Stephon Diggs, eventually they moved him. I like Brandon Ayuk. I think he's the 4th or the 5th best receiver in the league, but I would move him because let's be honest, with McCaffrey, Kittle, and Debo, and Purdy moves well enough, you can move the pocket. Those are 3 really, really. I mean, McCaffrey and Debo are such Swiss Army knives. And to your point, Purdy's not an over-the-top thrower. No. I could see them just saying to themselves, we want a really high-end possession guy. If you put Cooper Kupp with the Niners, he's not going there.
Yeah,
but it's like you don't need a deep threat. Purdy's not a big-armed guy. Like Denver with Bo Nix, you don't need – he doesn't throw a great deep ball. Now, by the way, one of the reasons, Atlanta looks and gets Penix good deep ball, well, their takeaway is they want to be that kind of football team. By the way, in a dome, not bad weather. I mean, so far, hold on, let me look at it. We have not had a defensive player taken yet. We just did. Hold on.
They had to take one of the D linemen, I would imagine.
13 straight picks on one side of the ball, any round, any year. First time in NFL history that's happened. I'm going to guess the Oregon State tackle goes to the Saints. That's my guess.
I also think it speaks to every single year there is Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Clowney.
Right.
And there just wasn't that guy this year, right? To me, the best defensive lineman was the Texas kid, Murphy. But he's 6'1", and he's a good player. And those guys historically go around 12 to 15. That's Aaron Donald, I think, went 13th. They don't go 5th. And all the pass rushers, I think the UCLA guy, if his medical was clear, he goes in the top 10. But when you're medically forced to retire with a neck injury, I'm sorry, it scares teams.
Boom.
Who they take?
Well, I predicted it right. Talisi Fuanga, Oregon State tackle, goes to the Saints. That was pretty predictable. Need. He's a right tackle. Jeff Schwartz said he looked at all his tape this year. He did not lose a single snap running the ball. He won every single snap running the ball. He is the best run blocking tackle. Some are saying, in years, just a tough kid. So they go offensive tackle. That's neat. Derek Carr's not hypermobile.
Well, I think a lot of people feel about him. He literally could play all 5 positions. That improves your value. Like he could play left tackle, he could play right tackle, he could play the guards. Makes you a pretty valuable player. He also comes from Jonathan Smith. I know some people watching might not be locked in on Oregon State. Runs a pretty kind of an old school Jim Harbaugh operation. Runs the ball down your throat. So I would imagine, if you tell me in 5 years this guy's one of the better players in the first round, I think it's very believable.
Oh, I absolutely think that's true. Hold on, I'm going to look at this right now. This is crazy. John, this is crazy. So we're on pick 15. No defensive players being taken. I feel like I'm being validated. I didn't love J.J. McCarthy. He gets drafted after Penix. Bo Nix to Denver I thought would happen. I'm an offensive guy over a defensive guy. I feel like this is my validation, my coronation as a sportscaster. I've been so anti-defensive coach for years. Good Lord. So we got Colts on the – so now Colts –
they could take one of these defensive linemen. I mean, there are just a lot of.
When's the last? Now they have
DeForest Buckner. They've drafted some guys that haven't.
But I think they need an edge.
Yeah, I mean,
I think they're going to go defense.
They could go with the Alabama guy. I think if UCLA's medical was better, he'd be an easy pick. Jared Verse. The one thing I heard with Verse, and this makes sense, like the outdoor teams, like the AFC North, he's a power guy. Makes a lot of sense for like Cincinnati, Baltimore. In the dome, think about some of these dome teams, the great pass rushers, a Jonathan Abram, a Dwight Freeney. It's more of a speed game. The Rams forever when they were in a dome in St. Louis. So I wonder if they take the Alabama pass rusher, Dallas Turner.
I also think when you have Shane Steichen, there is an understanding that Shane's going to get the most. I mean, Gardner Minshew had a heck of a season. He's not going to put up those numbers with the
They were a drop pass away from winning the division and being in the playoffs.
It's crazy. So, and that's nothing against Antonio Pierce, but Shane Steichen, I mean, go back to Justin Herbert's rookie year when he had Shane Steichen. Go look to Jalen Hurts' MVP level year with Shane Steichen. Jalen Hurts the minute he leaves. It's not the same player. So I think Indy looks at it and thinks, listen, we got a coach here. He elevates all of our offensive players. So let's go. Our first round pick. This is very Green Bay, by the way. They've always had offensive coaches. First round, they go defense historically. Yeah. Green Bay loves their defense because their feeling is we've had Holmgren, Mike McCarthy, Matt LaFleur. Our coaches will elevate our offensive. They don't draft. The Packers never draft linemen and offensive linemen first round. They haven't had a bad offensive line in 25 years.
You could also justify it by going, well, we got to play C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence 2 years away. And Trevor Lawrence probably won't be as shitty as he was last year.
Good call.
So we got to beat those guys 4 times. And now Tennessee gets an offensive, coach in Brian Callahan. They've added some offensive weapons. Levis, I mean, he's a great wild card. He's got a lot of talent. If they just could get him on the straight and narrow, all of a sudden you're playing some quarterbacks. You could also say, we got this quarterback. Minshew was much more ready to play. Who's pretty raw. The more help we could get him, they got Pittman. You could easily take one of these other wide receivers here. The other guy from LSU, who a lot of people think
Brian Thomas. I'm going to make a prediction here that we go on a little bit of a defensive run here. I'm going to say Indy and Seattle go defense. Indy, I think your point is great. You got Trevor Lawrence in that division. You got C.J. Stroud in that division. You need a pass rusher. I think that's a great point. I think Seattle, I mean, come on.
They don't need a wide receiver.
They got receivers. Yeah. They at all. Now, they could probably use a tight end. There's nobody on the board here at this spot. So Seattle tight end is in need. They got a great corner last year. So Seattle, to me, is an edge rusher. I think we're going to have a chance here to go on a 2 or 3 or 4 straight defensive players picked. So, and then after this, you have Jacksonville. Jacksonville may go tackle at 17.
You know who's loving this right now, Colin?
18.
Is all the playoff teams. Because what wins in the playoffs? The trenches. The playoff teams in the 20s are licking their lips that some of these defensive linemen fall down there. If Byron Thomas or somehow Dallas Turner falls to the early 20s, even Latu, whose tape, I mean, he's the most productive pass rusher in the country the last 2 years.
Now he's got some
neck injury is concerning, but
Chop Robinson may go like so.
The corner hasn't been picked either, which is pretty rare. Usually, a top corner gets picked in the top 15.
Now that's Nate Wiggins of Clemson, who is viewed as sort of he got better.
Weighs 175 pounds.
He's not Patrick Surtain or Sauce. He's not. He's a good starting, maybe makes a Pro Bowl. But I do think, generally speaking, John, this as a former NFL scout, generally in a bad draft, you got about 15 first-round players. This one I've told you got about 19. The feeling is you got about 19 first-round picks here. So this is a really, really good draft. Again, it's very good at the top, gets a little wonky mid to late 5th, I've been told by multiple executives, but it's really good here. So if Dallas Turner goes 15 or 16, wow, that is a good productive player, middle first round. A lot of drafts, John. Last year's draft, Dallas Turner's a top 7-8 pick.
For sure. Probably. Well, the quarterbacks are pushing them all down, right? If 6 guys go in the top 12, I mean, there's only 6 position players off the board. So once think about the Raiders, they picked at 13th, and they probably got a top non-quarterback, top 5 player in the draft. So even the Saints, to get the Oregon State offensive lineman, there was talk about that guy going in the top 10 to the Titans. So you get a guy that easily on a given year, non-quarterback, could be in the mix to go in the top 10. It's just what happens when these quarterbacks go, they put you down. The other thing is those 3 wide receivers. So it's the 6 quarterbacks and the 3 wide receivers. That's 9 freaking players. I mean, shoving all these players down. So kind of crazy.
All right, here we go. Let's see what the Colts do. Oh, UCLA edge rusher. Here we go.
He's the best of them all.
Latu. Now, dominant Pac-12 edge rusher, fiery kid, some injury concerns. But all the stuff I read, Lance Zierlein, most people said he was the best pure pass rusher in the draft.
Not even close. It's not even, you talk to scouts, it wasn't even debatable. Dallas Turner has an all-time athlete. A lot of people thought, God, there should have been a little more. Verse, all power, not speed. Also, I just know the way these conversations happen. even though he today is different than he was. He started at Albany, Colin. I didn't even know Albany had a football team, and then transferred to Florida State, changed positions, puts on weight, and he's become a really good player. But like we talked about earlier, if you play in a dome, you don't want that power rusher. You want the speed rusher. So Latu, a great edge rusher. He's big. It is concerning, but never forget, he went to Washington out of high school when they were in their heyday with Peterson. I mean, recruiting high-end NFL guys. Then the neck injury happens. And listen, doctors aren't always right, especially when it comes to athletes. Told he could medically retire. He'll never play football again. Then he goes to UCLA for 2 years. He's one of the best players in the country. This is the hard thing about like Penix.
Yeah, dominant.
So when a doctor looks at you and goes, I don't feel great, it's like, well, I've watched him for 2 years. He never missed a snap. What are you supposed to say?
Well, I've been saying this on the show. I think we both said this. If you hear a guy will return in 8 weeks, John, on average, he's back in 5. I mean, whenever I hear, out 8 weeks, no, he's not. He's back in 5. Every 5 to 10 years in this country, we make medical advances. The quality of care today compared to when I was 35 instead of now 60, the quality of healthcare I've gone through. I go to the dentist now, John. My cleaning is 12 minutes. They have lasers.
It's amazing.
Remember when you used to
it took 2 hours
and it hurt? And it hurt. My staff makes fun of me. I go 4 times a year. They're like, do you have a crush on the dental hygienist? I'm like, it's 12 minutes. I get free toothpaste. It's all lasers. So it's like the quality of stuff, the quality of healthcare is, I'm texting Ballard.
The other thing is the training of the players, I would say, over the last decade and where we are today is so much better in college at these Power 5 programs than it was 30 years ago. When I was at Fresno State in 2009 and 2010, we would 2 days a week after practice go to this local, it's called Rallies. You ever heard of Rallies? The burger joint?
Yeah.
And get like 100 double cheeseburgers. And they were not good for you. That's what you'd hand out to the players. No team is doing stuff like this. This was 12, 14 years ago. So the level of care they have for themselves, let alone the training, is just in a different level. The other thing is, I had Mayock on the show a couple weeks back, and his whole thing was when doctors would push against a player, he'd go, well, yeah, this guy was injured at 19. He's 22 now and has missed 1 game in 3 years. And you're telling me he's not a durable player. Like, I've just watched him play in the SEC or the Big Ten or like you said, the Pac-12 this year was a very physical, good conference. So if this guy's hanging against all these NFL offensive linemen, he's just
going to my second.
I don't blame you. That's a good pick by the Colts. He stays healthy. That's a big time pick.
I want to go to the sauce right now so badly, but I can't. I got to stay hydrated. I got staff here. I feel like my family's killing me. I tell my family, Dad's working tonight. I got 13 messages. People, it's draft night. Why don't you do that in August 3rd? I got nothing to do.
Adam Silver couldn't find a way to get the Laker game and the Knicks game on Friday over tonight. What are you doing? These are your 2 biggest series.
What are you?
I mean, this is insane. I haven't watched a dribble tonight, and those series have been fantastic.
Yeah. So my guess is Seattle goes edge rusher 2. That's what I'm going to guess.
Defensive coach. This is where they've kind of got stuck, Colin, in this Geno Smith business because their roster's not bad. They've been competitive, but they can only do so much. Like, what's their upside as a team? 9-10 wins. Where their downside could be 5-6 quick.
John, Arizona's got 11 picks. They already got the best receiver. They have another first coming up. They have 3 in the third and a second. Arizona is going to be a different team by Sunday afternoon. They're going to probably have 7 new starters. And I like this coach. They've got a tight end I like, a running back, now a star receiver, had a weak receiving group. I've always liked Kyler Murray more than everybody else. The defensive side last year, despite a lack of talent, played really hard. Arizona's going to come out of this weekend, and Seattle may be the 4th best team in that division.
I had the wide receiver coach buddy who I was texting with had an interesting point. He said the one thing that's difficult for these guys, they get drafted really high, is they go to such terrible situations where they're immediately walking the room and everything has to depend on them. Like Marvin Harrison has to catch 80, 90 balls for the offense.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure for young players. Where a lot of guys get to go to a position, and maybe there's another good wide receiver in the room, and it takes a little off them. Like Marvin's immediately going to be treated by defensive coordinators like all these star wide receivers in the NFL. It's going to be, and you're not getting Purdue on the schedule. Rutgers isn't on their schedule. It's the Niners, it's the Rams, it's, it's tough. So that's where Rome really benefits. He kind of gets to ease in. He's got Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. If you told me he had a more productive year, just because he's going to have less, I would say, eyeballs on him on a weekly game plan standpoint, right? Where if I'm playing the Arizona Cardinals next week, Trey McBride's a good player. That tight end for Colorado State, he's really good. But Marvin Harrison's getting double teamed until you prove you got anything else in your group. Where Rome Odunze, all of a sudden, he's playing the slot with those, where he's playing outside, and you got Keenan Allen in the slot and DJ Moore out. He might just sneak into 65 balls and 7 touchdowns as a rookie.
Well, the good news is they've got another first. My guess is they go defense with a defensive coach. Then they have a second. Again, they've got the quarterback. So Houston turned it around, and they didn't have their quarterback with all these picks and free agent moves. Kyler can play. So my take is they're going to get another receiver, John, in the third, where they have 3 picks, because they need another edge rusher. I think they need another corner. I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona didn't go defense here, because I actually think they're in a pretty good spot. Their offensive line's pretty mediocre, but I think they need an edge rusher, a corner. Listen, I'm sitting here looking at, I got Seattle, Jacksonville, Cincinnati, and the Rams. I can make an argument. Jacksonville probably needs an offensive lineman. Probably. I could see Pittsburgh lost Deontay Johnson, going and getting Brian Thomas, the wide receiver from LSU, who doesn't have a big route tree, but is classic Steeler, big moves, over the top playmaker.
Jacksonville could take a wide receiver as well, though, because they lose Ridley to the Titans. That's why there's been a lot of smoke with them, with Brandon Ayuk. Cincinnati, one thing they do is T. Higgins, a couple years ago, they had Bates, who's now on Atlanta. They franchised, then he walked. They're not signing T. Higgins to a long-term deal because it's all going to go toward Jamar Chase. Wouldn't shock me if they went wide receiver to kind of stock the cupboard when he leaves. They're just ready to hit the ground running. So this could be a little wide receiver. Would the Rams go wide receiver with Kupp getting a little old, or would they go line?
No, I don't think so. I think they want an edge. I think the Rams now are sitting there thinking, are we going to get Dallas Turner at 19?
I could see Seattle with Mike McDonald, defensive coach, taking him.
That's what I think. That's
Ozzie Newsome loved Alabama guys. He's a Baltimore guy. I could see him liking the Alabama crew. Sometimes you got to look at like where these guys come from, what they think. Now, John Schneider, for the first time, I mean, this is his baby now, right? With Pete long gone. So.
The last 2 drafts have been John's drafts, and I think they've done a really, really good job. So here we go. Seattle at 16. We're kind of guessing edge rushers. That is kind of my guess. Let's see. All right.
I just have to wonder if they regret, I guess Penix was off the board.
Oh, they went Byron Murphy. Seahawks go get a defensive tackle with their rookie defensive coach. The Ravens are physical on the lines. The coach comes from Baltimore. So Byron Murphy, defensive tackle. What do you make of it?
Well, we've seen a lot of guys in this mold have a lot of success. He's 6'1". He can rush the passer. I talked to a guy that goes through the University of Texas as a scout. The one big guy that got the DUI, a lot of character concerns. Yes. This guy's the opposite. This guy's character, I've heard, is high level. They love him in that program. A lot of people think this guy's a badass. I talked to a lot of people that thought this guy should be in the mix as a top 10 pick. If Atlanta had not gone with a quarterback and had gone defensive line, like most people thought they would do, I thought they were going to take this guy. So getting him at 16, Latu and Byron Murphy, just based on the tape, that's pretty incredible value at 15 and 16. I mean, these are high-end impact players.
Now, I'm not going to comp him to Aaron Donald.
In that mold.
Donald's a little small, 6'1.5", ball of explosion. He is the thing on Murphy is what they say is he's one of these defensive linemen. Again, God doesn't make a lot of these, like really good feet. You ever watch the Aaron Donald, like tire drills? You're like, the hell is that? That doesn't even make sense. What is he, a receiver? So this guy is viewed as small, explosive, great pad leverage, kind of blow stuff up, high character.
Ultimately, too, when you get a new coach, you want to play to the guy's strengths. When you think the Baltimore Ravens defense, you think a dominant front. And one thing Seattle has really lacked, which is crazy since kind of that Richard Sherman run, when their defensive line, I saw that team play in person 3 or 4 times, from Bennett to Averill. I mean, they had guys. It was like, how are you blocking these guys? We talk so much about Richard and Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor. Their defensive, obviously, their linebackers were good too, but their defensive line was awesome. The Ravens, when's the last time they didn't have a good defensive line? But when they didn't have a franchise in like the mid 90s, I mean, they've had a dominant defensive line the whole time.
All right. Do we want to bring Danny Parkins in to talk Bears? Let's bring Danny in from Chicago. He is, hold on. Oh, there is Danny. Danny, let's bring him on. So, John, have you talked? Danny is the most talented young broadcaster, I think, in the country doing radio. Buddy and Nick Wright introduced me years ago. Like Nick Wright, has a borderline gambling problem. That's why I love him.
Me too.
I say
borderline
that
is kind.
as the problem is with the casinos and the books because he actually wins. He comes from a math family. So, Danny, first of all, I was surprised. I thought they would go defense, Danny, with the pick because the defensive coaches can pound the table and kind of get usually, they make 2 to 3 times what a coach does. But Ryan Poles has so much steam now, so much momentum. Eberflus doesn't. So my take by getting Rome Odunze, that's a Ryan Poles call. That's my take. Yours.
100%. When Ryan Poles was here, when he got hired, people were asking him about team building philosophy. And he said, remember where I came from. And that's Kansas City, because he got criticism for his first draft where he didn't have a first round pick, taking Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker with his 2 second-round picks. And I criticized him for not taking a receiver in George Pickens with the Jaquan Brisker pick. And he said, remember where I came from, which he was basically saying, I didn't think anyone there was the right guy to take, but I'm not going to not support the quarterback. He traded for Claypool. It didn't work. He trades the number 1 pick. He wants DJ Moore attached to it. It does work. He trades a 4th-round pick for Keenan Allen. He's one of the most consistent players in the NFL. And then the 9th pick overall comes up, and he makes what I thought was the obvious pick if he was on the board, and he gives Joe Burrow his Jamar Chase. These guys have a rookie contract timeline that are completely aligned. I know Burrow and Chase were in back-to-back drafts, but the idea is the same, to get Caleb Williams a weapon that he can grow and develop with. I'm ecstatic. This is modern offensive football finally coming to Chicago for the first time in my lifetime.
Pretty nuts.
Well, John and I were talking about this. When is the last rookie quarterback that got this? This is insane. Gerald Everett's a throw-in. He was the Chargers' best tight end, highly productive.
Well, we've never seen it for a number 1 overall pick quarterback. We've definitely never seen it for that. Justin Herbert had a very good situation in LA with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And, he was supported with Austin Eckler and Corey Linsley at center and Rashawn Slater at tackle. And he set the rookie record for passing touchdowns with 31. So we have never seen it for a number 1 overall pick to have this type of nest to come into and develop. And if I may for a second, because Colin, you and I had talked about this on the show about how Chicago's a place where they've never had offensive success and quarterbacking goes to die and all of that stuff. And that cynicism that Bears fans is well earned. The amount of luck that led to this moment is just staggering. Week 18, 2 years ago, the Bears needed the Texans to beat the Colts. And Davis Mills led a 14-play drive where he converted a 4th and 10 and a 4th and 20 on the same drive, and then a 2-point conversion to give them the number 1 pick in the Bryce Young draft. They then trade the number 1 pick to the Panthers. The Panthers then have to be so bad, and they lost 4 of those games by only 3 points to give them the number 1 pick to be in this position to get Caleb Williams. So the stars are finally aligning in Chicago to be set up at quarterback and have a good offense and potentially a great offense for literally the first time in my lifetime with any consistency.
So Minnesota trades up 23-17. Jacksonville slides back. Minnesota selects Dallas Turner. So 10 minutes ago, John and I sort of guessed, we predicted we would go on a defensive run here. So since Latu goes to Indy, Byron Murphy, the small but explosive defensive tackle, a Longhorn, goes to Seattle. It's a real need. Minnesota smartly moves up. So, Minnesota moved up just a little to get J.J. McCarthy. Boy, this division's got good personnel. This division is freaking ridiculous. I'm serious. You could do a Pro Bowl, offensive Pro Bowl with the NFC North that could beat the league. I seriously believe that.
Danny,
you have the best.
That's my thing with the Bears. I mean, we're all in love. I mean, how could you not be what they've done? It's not the Packers. We know if that quarterback keeps playing, they're going to be good. You'd assume their defense can't be as shitty as it's been. And the Lions, honestly, should have beat the 49ers, should have been the Super Bowl. So you could have an excellent improved team and still be the third best team in that division.
They could be.
Very rarely.
I mean, it could be a 10-win team gets third place in this division. It could be 3 playoff teams that come out of the North.
Honestly, I think Minnesota and Chicago will battle for a wild card spot. I think Detroit still has the best roster. I think Green Bay's is young, not as good as Detroit's, but it's pretty damn interesting offensively. The Packers defense never delivers. I couldn't say the last year I thought great defense. It just doesn't. The Aaron Rodgers year, it was pretty good, but Green Bay does offense better than anybody. They can't get the defense right, even though they draft it in the first round historically almost every year. So Dallas, Turner.
Do you know what I wonder with Poles?
So
and I wonder if Poles may say this tonight in his press conference, because you hit on the Claypool situation. I mean, they missed badly on character. And like you said, he came from around Ballard and Andy. I mean, they value character pretty high with their high-end guys. I wonder if they would have taken Rome over Neighbors. Like Rome was the second wide receiver on their board. It wouldn't shock me with that at all, because his character, from what I was told, is elite.
Yeah, Brock Heward told me that he's one of the 2 favorite players that he's seen at Washington in being around the program in about 20 years. And you know what's crazy too? They kind of telegraphed it, not the Bears, but Caleb. Like, it came out the other day that Tom Pelissero had it, that Rome Odunze was working out with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, with Caleb Williams throwing them the ball. Caleb and Rome were on the same flight from LA to Detroit for the draft. Caleb put on Instagram a couple hours before the draft how much he liked Rome Odunze's outfit. So I think it might come out, because I mean, they've been doing install with Caleb Williams. Like, I mean, this has been locked up for 8 weeks that Caleb's going to be a Bear. It wouldn't shock me at all if Ryan Poles admits that he asked Caleb Williams for input on who he wanted them to take at number 9. And so, yeah, the character part for Poles, sure, but it would not surprise me at all if Caleb Williams had at least a say in Rome Odunze being a Bear.
So I would told this by multiple scouts and GMs in the league that this is the most talented top of a draft in years. Brock Bowers goes 13. The best run blocking offensive tackle in years goes 14 to the Saints. Byron Murphy goes 16. Dallas Turner, who was considered a top 8 pick, goes 17. But guys, for years, Danny, I've always been told by scouts, a good draft, you'll have 17 to 18 first round players, and then it's Death Valley. I was told this year it was 19 to 20. God, I'm amazed. My guess is Cincinnati's next, guys. I think they go wide receiver. You got to defend. Oh, no, they went and got a Marius Mims. This is the first pick I have real questions with. Not a ton of starts. Listen, somebody's going to bust in the first 18 picks. This one scares me.
I mean, multiple guys will bust.
I'm going to throw it out there.
Will bust in the first 18 picks. I mean, don't you think this is maybe Joe Burrow needs to be healthy in order for us to be good? Like when Joe Burrow
the Bengals love the height, weight, speed guys too. You know, this guy's got 8 starts or whatever. A little bit of a I wouldn't say a flyer because he comes from Georgia, but pretty risky. But that's kind of their history. I mean, they take some risks.
I mean, yeah, but when Burrow is healthy, they win.
For sure. Win big.
So I mean, I know everybody apparently Hendrickson wants to be traded and T. Higgins wants to be traded and guys are getting out of there because you can't pay everybody. But I'll roll the dice with a healthy Joe Burrow and a healthy Jamar Chase. And so if this pick helps keep them upright, that's That's not the worst thing in the world. The run on offensive players was just remarkable. Like we knew it was going to be the top 7. We were like, oh, maybe it'll be the top 9. But what, it was the top 14? Top 14 picks?
You have to wonder if this is going to start being a trend, with the way college football is much more offensive. I mean, Ohio State, a historic program, is an offensive program now. Alabama now with DuBois going to lean more offense. Georgia's probably the last of a dying breed. Even Brian Kelly, look at him. Jayden Daniels, Malik Neighbors. I mean, it's just wonder if this is just kind of where we're headed as a sport.
Well, there's 2 quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders will go very high next year. I do think Cam Ward at Miami is a fascinating player. Saw a ton of him at Washington State. He is really electric. There's a 3rd quarterback. I think it's the Georgia kid. Is he eligible? He's I worry about Georgia guys because they literally play with it's 28 NFL guys. It's like I just don't. It's like JJ McCarthy. Jesus, did you ever trail? Did you ever not have a 3rd and 2? I mean, when was 3rd and 14? I mean, that's like the league.
I mean, JJ McCarthy went a half without being asked to throw a football.
He was Jimmy Garoppolo of college football.
There's a stat that he only threw the ball, and I'm this is top of the head. Like he only threw the ball on 3rd down 34 times the whole season or something. I looked at the stat and I'm like, oh no, that's not the NFL. That's like, well, I mean, Alabama quarterbacks, Georgia quarterbacks historically, and that Michigan team. When you get 18 pro players, that's why I've defended Michael Penix, Danny, with Michigan. I'm like, do you know how many good quarterbacks look bad during that 15-year Alabama Nick Saban defensive run? Penix was great. I watched him twice against Oregon. He was exceptional. Michigan beat C.J. Stroud. So I'm going to give you Michigan. You were overwhelmed. I'm okay with that.
The Penix thing, and I'm sure you guys talked about it a ton. It's obviously the biggest surprise pick of the draft so far. Brian Baldinger said to me on the show, he was like, I hear Atlanta's taking a QB and that they love Penix. This was 10 days ago. And I thought it was the dumbest thing I had ever heard because they gave Kirk Cousins $100 million. Their last 3 first-round picks are skill position guys. The defense is pretty good. Go try to win a division and get a piece for right now. But I wonder if they're saying we are good. Cousins is going to make us better. And so we're not going to be picking in the top 10 for the next couple of years. So Michael Penix will learn from Kirk Cousins and we'll have an elite quarterback prospect learn from Cousins. And then they'll never have to pick in the top 10 again for the next decade.
Denny, basically they're saying we're going to do a Green Bay Packer. We're just going to,
they just did it with the old guy
in our lifetime.
Because Penix, I thought, was ready to play day one because of his age, but they're going to make him sit for 2 years at least.
My guess is he sits for
you think
a year. Also,
$100 million
Cousins
guaranteed
is made of
for Cousins.
I know, but they're not paying anybody offensively. That's why they went in free agency and can get a Rondale Moore. They can go get players. They don't have, Jarrett, the defensive lineman's making money. They're not paying. They had so much money for Kirk. They're not paying very many.
I wonder if that owner got so scarred after watching the quarterback play these last 2 years and says, under no circumstances after dealing with Matt Ryan for a decade, are we ever dealing with this again? So not only was he behind it, I wonder if he kind of pushed for it. Just double down on this position. Because watching Desmond Ridder
always have a succession plan. That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's possible. That would be an ownership thing.
And Raheem Morris, I was telling Colin, I think 2 years ago, had a front row seat. Stafford went down and the whole season got derailed. And now Cousins is coming off an Achilles. Now it's an expensive Achilles, $100 million, but still.
Danny, we said this. Raheem was a head coach, got fired. Why? Quarterback. He goes to L.A. He becomes Sean McVay's best friend. McVay is in his ear saying, dude, you're going to get another job. But let me just tell you, we upgraded off a Super Bowl quarterback. You cannot be good enough or deep enough at quarterback. And I do think Raheem is one of these, these defensive coaches wear me out. But I do think Raheem, I've been told, he is quick. He is also kind of a progressive. He's not one of these I watched Pittsburgh Steelers offense sometime. I'm like, can you guys run motion? It looks like I'm watching the NFL Network and 80s. It's like there are these defensive coaches, Pete Carroll. I'm like, can you get an offensive line right, Pete? McDermott, they couldn't get a run game for 7 years. Raheem's not that guy. He's got a little bit. I'm trying to. D'Amico Ryans is the same. He's a defensive coach coming from an offensive culture, and I think it matters. I think Kyle Shanahan, D'Amico comes out and says, well, I get the league. And I think Raheem Morris says, I get the league. I'm with McVay. Those guys, by the way, has anybody on McVay's tree not worked yet?
Right. Which is why I wanted the Bears to fire Eberflus and hire someone better than Shane Waldron, although he is, he's on the tree as well. He's an old passing game coordinator there. Offense is the way of the league. And obviously, if you hit at quarterback, it's never a bad pick. It's just a shocking allocation of resources to draft the old quarterback with the injuries in terms of a draft prospect when you just signed the old quarterback coming off of the big injury. Like, this is a very unconventional thing. At least with Jordan Love, it had worked for the franchise before, and they thought Rodgers was done. But then Rodgers shocked him and won a couple of MVPs. Kirk Cousins hasn't played a game for the Falcons, and they drafted his replacement.
Okay. Danny Parkins has a book, Pipeline to the Pros. It's outstanding. Also, Danny Parkins and Spiegel. It's Chicago. It's a big radio hit. I can't believe we got you. It's 9:17. You have a family and young children.
Colin, I'm in Detroit. It's 10:17. I'm in Detroit to see the Bears get Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. I left my 4-year-old and 2-year-old to my wife in Chicago. I'm here for the party, my man.
Colin, the Bears just won the 2027 Super Bowl tonight. Come on.
I'm texting Nick Wright, taunting him that there's no shame in Patrick Mahomes losing to Tom Brady and Caleb Williams in Super Bowls. Okay, like I'm here as long as you listen. If you guys want to get back to the 20s of the draft, I'm good to go. But my God, thank you for having me on. But yeah, trust me, I got nothing.
Okay, one more. Danny, we're going to keep you for one more pick because this is great. And by the way, and I've said this before with Danny, he is so talented at what he does. And Nick Wright introduced me to him years ago, and he and Nick have this poker brain that they can do math very quickly in their head. And so I say this as we build out our gambling vertical at the volume. Danny's going to be a free agent. He's going to be Kirk Cousins. Is that he's a nice guy, and people are going to say, well, Danny Parkins, and then you're going to look up and he's going to have 42 touchdowns and 7 picks, and he's going to go 42-8. How were you this year, by the way, with your picks?
I started 15-0 against the spread on the air in the NFL, documented. True story. Started 15-0 against the spread on the air.
Dude, Jason McIntyre is on a heater on NBA. I think he's 11-1.
Oh my God. It's the greatest feeling in the world when you feel like you're in the zone. You feel so much smarter than you are. And I had our social media guy cut the whole thing together and put it out. I'm like, I'm not getting nearly enough attention for going 15-0. And then I promptly went 0-6.
Okay. Jared Verse. I told you John Middlekauff, Jared Verse to the Rams. So this is a position of need. And I had said this earlier. I was on the air today when Diana Rossini said the Rams were thinking of moving up. And I said, it's got to be Brock Bowers or Jared Verse. I knew they liked Jared Verse a lot. So I watched them at Florida State. Now, the competition wasn't as good as the SEC, but I thought he was more dominant than Dallas Turner. That was my take. Now, he wasn't late to the UCLA kid. That kid's just best pass rusher in the draft. But this is a real position of need. So now they have a second and 2/3. They want a running back, a receiver, and a defensive tackle. So Jared Verse, I actually watched some of because Florida State was a pretty good football team. This kid starts day one, opposite of Young, who they picked up last year from Tennessee. So the Rams had 2 third-round picks last year. They both hit on the defensive line. They go back to the defensive line. Start with you, John. Thoughts on this?
Well, they lost Aaron Donald, so you need to get some push in the pocket. The other thing is losing Aaron Donald. I mean, they were right there with Detroit. Easily could have won the playoff game. Think who you got to play. The Niners, Kyle Shanahan, Purdy. You got Ben Johnson, Jared Goff, and the Lions. Danny's Caleb Williams and the Bears. Jordan Love. Dak and Jalen Hurts, all those guys beside Jared Goff are relatively mobile. So this makes sense. I mean, this was a guy, I would say halfway through the season when Florida State was riding high, was talked about as a top 15 pick. Now he ends up going, 19? So it's not too far off. But I do get a little nervous. And again, maybe it's old school, like the transfer portal, whatever, guys transfer. But this guy didn't go from Miami to Florida State or Texas to Florida State. He went from Albany. Now he's good. He's a power rusher. The other thing with power rushers, it's just you can't throw every offensive tackle back into the quarterback. Speed usually translates. Now you get power. There are good power rushers, but like that's his thing. He is not like getting around guys. So just something to keep an eye on. Now I give the Rams credit that they've hit on a lot of picks, and this is this is Sean McVay's first ever first round pick. He's been there since 2017. It's 2024. This is our first ever first round pick.
Well, Les Snead said F them picks.
Danny.
I know.
Yeah, the thing with Verse that worried me a bit is what you just alluded to there at the end, like the straight power rusher. And he's old. I think he's over 2 years older than Dallas Turner. Like he's 2 years older than Latu and Turner. So like he was kind of a man among boys, like pushing around 19-year-old sophomores. So you can't do that in the NFL.
Danny and John, this is the cutoff I've been told. 19. People believe there were 19 first round picks. So a good draft is 18. This is a really good draft. 17, 18. This is 19. I thought Mims would be closer to the borderline because I think once you get to the 19, 20, 21, for instance, Brian Thomas is available. Pittsburgh lost Deontay Johnson to Carolina. I think they're going to look. They've done a great job historically with wide receivers, and they got Russell Wilson. Let's get him Pickens. He's got backs, the tight end from Penn State. But Thomas is a classic example of a later first-round pick where he doesn't have much of a route tree. He's just, he's classic LSU guy. It's like just insanely hyper-athletic. Not a lot to the route tree. He's an over-the-top guy, which Pittsburgh has done. I think Pittsburgh drafts receivers better than anybody in the league. And I think Green Bay finds good offensive linemen in middle rounds better than anybody in the league. So I'm going to go Brian Thomas as my guess here. But I do believe this is the cutoff spot in terms of now these are players with flaws, holes.
Or less positional value. It's like teams will start drafting guys who they're comfortable playing at guard. Jackson Powers Johnson could be a center that goes here and it'll be good, but not a guy that you normally would say in the first round. I think Xavier Worthy, little predictions, since I know I'm not staying on with you guys. I think Xavier Worthy's a Chief. Like that guy just screams Chief to me. That they would try to recreate the Tyreek Hill speed. I mean, if he's there, but they have a lot of needs. Protecting Mahomes is always good. Obviously, they lost Snead. They could take a corner. But
what about Pittsburgh right here? I mean, they just get Russell Wilson, deep ball.
I mean, if he goes in front of Thomas, it would surprise me a little bit just because he's like, I don't even know that he's 170 pounds.
He's 165 pounds.
But his highlights are incredible. He will go over the middle. Like he is a tough 165, and the dude set the combine record for the 40-yard dash. Like I can't wait to see if he works in the NFL. He's fun, man. He's very fun. He's my favorite guy probably left on the board.
The thing I can't get out of my head, we were talking about 5 minutes ago. When you sign a quarterback, especially an older quarterback who's not like Aaron Rodgers, his name's Kirk Cousins, his equity with the new fan base is going to be pretty small. So coming off the injury, what if he starts slow? No one in Atlanta is going to want just like throwing Penix. That's where it could get weird. And it could get weird fast if Cousins, and sometimes Cousins he was playing really good before he got injured, but he's had a lot of just rough couple week stretches. If it starts looking weird, he's not, he's maybe 80% rehab from the injury. He's never moved great. That situation could just get weird fast. I get big picture why they did it, but internally in their locker room, it's a risky move. It's a risky move.
Here's something interesting. I think Pittsburgh goes and gets Brian Thomas, but Miami and Philly are after Pittsburgh. They do not need wide receivers. Jacksonville does at 23. So I guarantee you Jacksonville is praying Pittsburgh doesn't take Brian Thomas because Miami and Philadelphia are stacked. And, by the way, Dallas at 24. Okay, you guys talk. I'm knocking down. My eyes are, there's no fuzz here with me, no alcohol. I got a 2-minute bathroom break.
Yeah,
Please.
yeah, yeah.
This is Danny Parkins.
Yeah,
John
do your
Danny,
thing. Do your thing.
Give me sitting here right now, halfway through tonight. Give me over under wins right now on the Bears for everyone to be happy. Does it have to be above 8?
Yeah, the number's set at 8.5. They won 7 last year. They've added Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, DeAndre Swift, Caleb Williams, and Rome Odunze, and upgraded their offensive coaching staff. They definitely should hit that over. CJ Stroud's rookie season last year showed what's possible.
And his team wasn't nearly as good as this Bears team.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So, and Caleb is so unique, man. We've never seen a player be so comfortable with the spotlight because of NIL, because of USC, because of he's been basically created in a lab for this moment. He said he woke up today and he felt like it was a normal day. He's getting be the number 1 pick in the draft. Like there's something about him that just, he's not going to be overwhelmed by the moment. So I expect him to be the offensive rookie of the year. I expect him to break at least one of the Bears records for futility. They've never had a 4,000-yard passer. The only team in the NFL. They're the only team in the NFL that's never had a 30-touchdown quarterback. But I mean, honestly, like if one of those falls as a rookie, we'll make the argument that he's already the best quarterback in Bears franchise history. So I do think they hit the over at 8.5.
That's where I think the Bears are fascinating is you compare them to the Texans. I think everyone in the league, and I don't know where you stand, would take D'Amico over Eberflus, right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, that
and Bobby
reasonable.
Slowick clearly has a chance to be like one of Shanahan, minions that becomes a star offensive coordinator. So to me, the pressure, Foles has had one of the great 12-month stretches in like GM history. And Caleb, even if he had an up and down rookie year, it's like he's going to get time, obviously. The pressure on this coaching staff is pretty immense.
Yeah, Shane Waldron has about as big of a spotlight on him as any offensive coordinator could possibly have in the league, and he definitely is a more significant figure to the Bears than Matt Eberflus, because what they can't do is do what they've done to the last 2 high-pick Bears quarterbacks. John Fox was the head coach when they drafted Mitch Trubisky. Dow Loggins was the offensive coordinator. They fired him after his rookie year, so he had to have 2 systems in 2 years. Justin Fields, drafted by Matt Nagy, plays before they wanted to play him, fire him. Then they hire Luke Getsy as the head coach.
Yeah.
2 systems in 2 years. There needs to be continuity. So if this season goes poorly and they blow it up and fire Matt Eberflus, hopefully Caleb Williams is so good that it's like Justin Herbert, who had to deal with, Anthony Lynn and then different coordinators and, Staley and Kellen Moore. And, he's been coach proof, but it wasted his rookie contract. So the Bears need continuity, and that's like the big vulnerability for sure for where they're at right now.
Danny, where are you in Detroit? It looks like you're in a studio.
I wish I was in a studio. No, I'm in an upstairs room. Our radio company rented out a Buffalo Wild Wings, and there's 5 radio stations here, and I'm the only one that is currently on the air. So everyone else is around me, kind of drinking and watching the draft, and I'm getting these takes off with Middlekauff and Cowherd.
Are you? Do you have a cocktail or food?
Yeah, I've had wings, and I've maybe had a celebratory beer after the Odunze pick, but I didn't know how you felt about that. So I wanted to keep it kosher. But yeah, it's possible that there's a beverage right here. I don't know. It's right there. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, all right.
The Bears went from a couple years ago having nobody on offense to having DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
Steelers have taken
It's awesome.
an offensive tackle. The Steelers have taken an offensive tackle. Fontenot.
Fatano.
Well, they haven't had. Yeah, I mean, listen, their offensive line, like Buffalo, I like the players, and it never gels. So I'm like, at some point, what do you make of it, John?
To me, the Steelers, it's just, I guess they have a little more upside now at the quarterback position, but they feel like the same thing year in, year out. Just different names, 9, 10 wins, and one and done in the playoffs. Like what is any difference this year? And the Atlanta situation on steroids. If Russell's boring, dinking and dunking, everyone's going to want to say Justin Fields get in there. And then the pressure of that, let's face it, he struggles throwing within the pocket. So unless Arthur Smith can rehabilitate him in 6 months, it feels like there's going to be a lot of hype around this franchise, but I don't expect to see much different, especially if Burrow's healthy. The Ravens, even the Browns, hell, they won 11 games this year, half of them with Joe Flacco.
So Fontenot is the Husky, by the way, as you know. I'm a Husky fan. He's
I've heard more guard than tackle. Some people thought he was a guard.
Well, he's
versatile.
He's like the Oregon State. Yeah. My take was I thought the Chargers, if they moved down to like 11 with Minnesota, they would get the Oregon State kid. If they moved down further, I thought they would get this kid. He's classic Harbaugh, just hands on you, brawler. There's no finesse. He's just going to beat you up. But for the record, that's Mike Tomlin. That's very Pittsburgh Steelers in that division. That's what they had.
David DeCastro years ago, remember from Stanford? They drafted him.
Stanford
like
guy, brawler.
Yeah, I mean the Bears drafted a guy like that, and they played him at right tackle in Darnell Wright last year, and he was great, all rookie right tackle. They drafted Broderick Jones last year in the first round, so this is back-to-back years with a first-round pick at tackle, and Broderick Jones didn't start right away for them. So it'll be interesting. I would assume that they think that Broderick's ready to go to left tackle and Fatano is going to be their right tackle right away. That would be my guess, but I guess he could slide inside to guard. But those are
no, he can.
Yeah, he definitely can. But I'm wondering what they're drafting him to do. I mean, those are just two premium resources on offensive linemen in each of the last 2 years.
You know, for years and years, there was a real kind of knock that the Pac-12, was kind of a second-tier conference. Let me tell you something. Jayden Daniels did play in it. You start looking, Penix goes 8, Rome Odunze goes 9.
Nix.
Bo Nix goes 12. God, there's a lot of Pac-12 players this year. Indy gets one.
Saints got one, the Oregon State.
Steelers just got one. This is one of the best. This is one. Oh, the Saints at 14. You may have 8 Pac-12 players. We said this. John and I are a lot of Pac-12 guys. You're more of a Big Ten guy. This was the best I'd seen the Pac-12 in 20 years.
That's high praise.
It was a.
It's why we joined. It's why we joined forces.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And honestly, Big Ten football can be unwatchable. I'm a fan of good college football. So I will be a little fair weather because when I went to Syracuse, I saw 10 wins in 4 seasons in college football. So my wife went to Clemson. So I can tend to be a bit of a fair weather college football observer. Like I just want to watch the good games and the good teams. But Minnesota, getting JJ McCarthy and Turner in this, like they could have never dreamed of that. They could have never dreamed of that. That's an unbelievable haul.
Right. Okay, this is Danny's book, Pipeline to the Pros. It's literally 10:35 where he's at. We do appreciate him stopping by. You're awesome. We're going to talk very soon. You're kicking butt. Go have another libation. And I really appreciate you stopping by. You didn't have to do this.
I wanted to, and I knew I was in Detroit, and I felt like, a Colin Cowherd, John Middlekauff production needed a presence from the team that got the A+ quarterback wide receiver tandem. That's, Caleb Williams says he wants 8 Super Bowls. This is the origin story of it happening.
Okay, Miami remember last year, they fell apart physically on the defensive front. They get Chop Robinson, who, again, a little bit of a flawed player, but tremendous upside. Chop Robinson to Miami. Not a shock. By the way, now we're having a run on defensive players. You're going to see the Clemson corner, Wiggins here, go pretty quick, I think. So Chop Robinson to Miami. Miami was a really good team late, and they literally lost like 4 to 5 defensive players up. They fell. It was a cluster injury. So this makes sense, John. Your thoughts?
Say this for James Franklin. He can't beat Ohio State or Michigan, but he sure can find NFL players high in the draft. Talent and recruiting is not James Franklin's issue. I mean, he gets blue chippers. Honestly, it's why a lot of Penn State guys get mad at him because it's like, with all this talent we have, can we ever beat anyone that matters? Like, no one cares about beating Rutgers in Minnesota.
I will say, though, if you're going to,
That's why he's going to keep his job, though.
People always said that. Well, and the other thing is, if you ever move off him, you know, Oklahoma's had like, remember when they got, what was the guy that missed? John Blake. But John Blake was an unbelievable recruiter. Stoops took his players and won a natty year 2. Ron Zook, unbelievable recruiter, leaves. I think it was Urban Meyer came in and just crushed. If you're going to have a coach who maybe isn't the great X's and O's guy, get a great recruiter because the next guy comes in. Like, I mean, so my takeaway is I think James has made Penn State relevant.
Sure.
And that's what Penn State is. If they ever move off him, the next guy's going to get like 16 NFL players.
For sure. I mean, you could say it got easier with Harbaugh leaving. The problem is Oregon, Washington, USC coming into the conference. But yeah, Miami, well, let's face it. I've said over and over is that I would not give Tua some massive contract over the next couple of months. I would play this out. If you can't win this division now, the Bills got worse. The Patriots are in shambles. And the Jets are a ticking time bomb of a couple hamstrings that all of a sudden their season could get derailed. So to me, Miami, we've seen the last couple of years, same shit. Start fast, peter out as it gets colder. You start playing the better teams. Let's face it, they weren't even close down the stretch playing the better quarterbacks. So I'm not that into them, Colin. I don't know where you stand on the Dolphins. Clearly, Mike is a good offensive mind, but I can't buy into the quarterback and the defensive personnel. I mean, they just lost their best player to the Raiders.
Yeah. So Danny Parkins, I want to thank him again for coming on the show. What a blast that was. So great to get him to drop in with the greatest draft in league
what a moment
by
for the
Chicago
Bears. That's a cool night.
It's great. I'm fired up. I love Chicago. Yeah, I think Miami is one of those where there's a lot I like about them. Second, I love getting.
Ballard text you back.
He did. They did very well. They did well. Listen, man. Again, from about 19 on, Jared Verse on. These are some flawed players. They're really good. Verse is a little older. He's a power rusher. Chop Robinson, again, people see he's a bit of a one-trick pony. Really good. Troy Fontenot is more of a right tackle, a brawler, no finesse to his game. Jacksonville is going to get Brian Thomas if he's available. Yeah. I swear to God, they're going to get that wide receiver. What do you think Philadelphia does?
I think they go
with
whoever their top corner is on the board, whether that's the kid from Alabama,
that's going to be Clemson,
Toledo,
or Alabama.
Yeah, I wonder if Wiggins is a little light. I mean, at 175 to draft him, I think.
No, I think you're right. They're going to get the Alabama kid.
With all these tackles off the board, I think they're inclined to always go in the trenches, but they've invested a lot in the offensive line. They've drafted defensive linemen constantly the last couple of years. I think they go DB. This is where sometimes it pays. There was a lot like Howie loves making a move, but he didn't even have to move, and whoever his top corner is on the board is going to be sitting there for him at 22. The other thing, Colin, sometimes in the 20s, 22 to 28 range, you get a guy with some flaws, but we've seen the Justin Jeffersons, the TJ Watts, like you can get really impact players in this range. Sometimes they're not the most hype guy coming into the draft, but you can get elite Pro Bowl guys right in this range. And if you do hit on them, guy at 23 is a lot cheaper than the guy at 7 on your books. So, I mean, you're only paying him a couple $1 million a year for 4 years.
Yeah. So if Philly goes Terrion Arnold, who, by the way, was a 98 recruit out of 100, he was a 5-star corner. What you notice about him when you watched Bama play is the really great athletes have something, and you can't teach it. The super twitchy athletes have a change of direction. Like you'll see these corners or there's receivers like jet, quick. Big guys generally don't have it. Arnold, it's cartoonish. His ability to get fooled and catch up. So he's the best corner in this draft. Wiggins is smaller. I think Philadelphia, I think this is a pretty honest move. They signed their 2 receivers. They got Saquon Barkley. They've spent big money on offense, which, by the way, that's where you should spend your money in 2024. I think they're going to load up on defense.
Well, here's the other thing. The last couple of years, they've only drafted from like 2 programs, Alabama and Georgia. So do not expect some random school to come off the board here. They have not messed with that, and they feel good about that strategy, even if some of the guys are still a work in progress. They are going to lean the elite programs and let it fail. If they miss, so be it. But they're not going to miss going with a Toledo, going with kind of a smaller Kansas State or whatever. They changed their philosophy a couple years ago, just Georgia and Alabama. Like, honestly, they just stick in the SEC. They drafted half their rosters, Georgia and Alabama. And even A.J. Brown, who they traded for, was an SEC guy who now they've signed to multiple contracts. So I would expect the Eagles to go Alabama here.
So let's go 22, 23, 24 Dallas, and then I'll let you go. We started at 6:04 at 7:41. We thought we were going to go for 45 minutes, but this is so much damn fun. I can do this all day. So I'm going to guess Terry and Arnold to Philly, Brian Thomas to Jacksonville. We got to stay for the Dallas pick.
I would say of all the teams in the league, I mean, their coach is on the last year of a contract. And I get it's not college football, so recruiting, that still doesn't happen in the pros. That's pretty weird. And I actually don't blame them for the way they've handled Dak. Like, why don't we just play this out? Let's see. Why do I have to give you another $250 million? Let's see you play well in the playoffs. But the McCarthy thing, that thing could get weird fast. You bring in Mike Zimmer, who, say this about Dan Quinn. You could argue Mike Zimmer might be a better defensive mind, but he's an angry curmudgeon who's been a head coach with some success. Jerry clearly likes him because he's from the heyday of the Cowboys. They've lost some talent. Ton of pressure. I know he's had a good couple years in the regular season, but their regular season's kind of irrelevant now. They've been rattling off 12 wins for 3 straight years, and then they've been bounced in the first round 2 of the last 3 years at home. So this Dallas thing, now luckily, here's the thing you would say about Jerry and the operation. They do draft pretty well. I mean, they have drafted pretty well. They don't have a running back. I mean, you see they're sniffing around Zeke's back in the building. I mean, they're kind of desperate, and this is not a good running back draft. I don't know. I mean, their offensive skill guys aren't as good as they were a couple years ago.
I thought it would be a decent running back draft a year ago, but Blake Corum's not a first or a second round pick anymore. He's not the same running back. He's more of a third or fourth off that injury. He just does not have the pop. I thought he was going to be like a high second when I watched him.
He's one of my favorite players.
So
you've had the stat forever about Dak's success with running the ball, right? When he has to turn into Aaron Rodgers, it fails every time. Rinse, wash, repeat.
Every time. I mean, there's literally all right, Philly's made their pick. There's literally a line of demarcation. If he gets like 100 yards rushing, Dak is an A- quarterback. Under it, he's a C+.
Dak's made for Jim Harbaugh's style of playing, right? Play defense, run the ball, try to throw it under 30 times, or Kyle Shanahan. Mike McCarthy's, I mean, really what he likes to do is play like he did in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers and throw the ball and not run it, even if he technically ran it more than Kellen Moore.
All right.
Who the Eagles take?
Here we go. The Eagles are taking Quinion Mitchell, the Toledo school
That's
corner.
shocking. That's shocking because, like I said,
people like him.
He clearly was their top corner on the board.
Toledo. It's one of those, what's funny, John? There's 2 positions in football, running back and corner. You can either play it or you can't. I mean, Sauce Gardner, Cincinnati, was the best player in college football, I thought, that year. There's certain positions that are sort of not bust proof, but high school to college, college to pro. If you can man up a guy in the corner, you're going to play the first day on campus. Yeah. And I tend to think running back and corner, even if the situation wasn't perfect, Saquon Barkley was going to work everywhere. When Joe Mixon worked and their O-line was shit his first 2 years in the league. Like, I think corner, if you look at this kid from Toledo, I don't really worry too much in terms of school or competition with running back and corner. First of all, there's a twitchiness speed aspect. The clock tells you if they can play. And I think this kid will end up being, well, first of all, he's a starter day one for this team. They're a bit of a mess.
I got to do some more research on him because just looking at the first 22 picks, and listen, I got my football start at Fresno State where we had a lot of first rounders. Those days are kind of over with the transfer portal because the moment you become a top 100 pick as a freshman or sophomore, these teams come after you. Honestly, the one weird team on here before Toledo was University of North Carolina. And Nick Saban tried to give Drake Maye $5 million to come play at Alabama. I mean, Colin, this first round, USC, LSU, Ohio State, Notre Dame, LSU, Bama, Washington, Penn State, Oregon, UGA, UCLA, Texas, Bama. I think get ready for this moving forward because all these Power 5 programs at the high end, the moment you become a high-end player as a sophomore, they get you on that phone and they say, transfer to my program, I'll give you $500,000, and these small schools can't keep the player. So this Toledo guy, I just don't think we're going to see much of that. And honestly, we'll probably only see it once tonight. If Brian Thomas, the next guy off the board, that's LSU again. It's just high-end programs. We'd have some random programs mixed in, but now with the transfer portal and NIL at the high end of the draft, man, these big programs just have bigger pocketbooks.
Well, this kid's got almost a 40-inch
A big-time athlete.
So
he's a big-time prospect.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it's kind of weird seeing that. I got to do some digging, like how he didn't get some more phone calls. Maybe he was offered. He stayed loyal. I mean, not everyone's just jumping ship, but.
Well, and the other thing is, again, cornerbacks are interesting. So I had talked, I think it was Notre Dame or somebody played. Notre Dame played Cincinnati and Sauce Gardner. This is fuzzy, but like Notre Dame, basically, a source told me they just didn't want to throw the ball.
They did. Remember, they did like a home and home, Cincinnati, Notre Dame.
And people said, like Brian Kelly at the time was like, yeah, we're just not. I think it was Brian.
Yeah,
Kelly.
it was.
2 years ago. And Brian's like, we're not going to throw to his side of the ball. It's just, we're not going to do it. This kid doesn't have prodigious numbers. I think he only had a couple picks, but nobody in Toledo's conference is throwing the ball to Quinion Mitchell's side of the ball. So again, cornerback and running back, especially corner, sometimes, teamers just don't throw to your side of the ball. To be a small school first-round cornerback, who didn't look at tape and go, we're going to the other side of the field? So don't get too alarmed if you look at his numbers and they don't jump off. This is not the SEC where sometimes you have to throw at all corners because they're all NFL
Well, based
guys.
on roster alone, the Eagles have no excuse, assuming that they stay relatively healthy, to not win the division, right? The Giants are not very good.
They should.
Washington's young. The Cowboys shouldn't have won the division last year, but the Eagles fell apart. Now the Eagles are spending a lot of money on Fangio and Kellen Moore. And there's some tangible pressure this year on Jalen, right? Who felt like he took a little step back last year. It's like, who'd Jags do?
Look at this. In 2021, Quinion Mitchell for Toledo played Notre Dame as a corner. He had a sack, a forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries. That's like corner. So
that's it.
Against good competition. That's like a defensive end.
When you are a smaller school guy and you have those moments against the big programs like Sauce did against Notre Dame, or this guy when he plays. Remember Khalil Mack at Buffalo played Ohio State and he had 3 sacks. It's like that changes your trajectory as a prospect because it's hard to evaluate half your games playing me and you, but when you get an opportunity to play a top 10, top 15 program as a prospect of smaller school, you can kind of change the hype on your own draft trajectory.
So Brian Thomas, Jacksonville 23, that's my hunch.
Yeah, I would agree.
I said, yeah. No, I mean, they lost Calvin Ridley.
Could the Cowboys go wide receiver?
Yeah, they have a good I could see Dallas trading up one spot. To who, Jacksonville? Brian Thomas just drafted. Brian Thomas goes to Jacksonville. We predicted it right. We predicted it about 15 minutes ago. Brian Thomas, wide receiver.
I think if you're Dallas, you got to feel pretty good about your defense. You got multiple DBs who are impact players. You got highly paid guys in your defensive line. Most of the top offensive linemen are off the board. I don't know how you don't go skill guy here. I mean, besides CeeDee Lamb, who do you feel great about? I guess Ferguson's a solid tight end, but you have no running back right now.
He's solid. Yeah, I think wide receiver's the play here. Who's the best wide receiver?
Well, it's probably up for debate. A lot of people like the Georgia McConkey kid. Worthy weighs 110 pounds. Worthy and Dak do not feel like a fit, do they?
No. Dak's not a terribly accurate thrower, and Worthy is tiny. Yeah. It'd be different if you could get, like, Brian Thomas is a big target. Rome Odunze is a big target. Harrison. You can't give me a small target with an inaccurate quarterback. If you're going to have a smaller target, you give me a Matt Stafford, give me an Aaron Rodgers, give me a guy who's a pinpoint thrower, Mahomes, a guy that's a little wild. I mean, I just don't think Dak's ever been an elite A+ arm guy. I could see Dallas. I'll be honest with you. I could see Dallas trading out of this thing.
I could too. And maybe one of those teams. I mean, is this a spot where could Kansas City come up? I don't. Worthy, I think, has some question marks off the field. Andy, they just had that situation with Rice. I don't know if they want to bring multiple question marks into that wide receiver room. It's one thing to have one, but if you got two of your six guys.
All right. So, folks, we've been doing this all night. This is our final pick for John and I.
Biggest shocker of the night, Penix.
Penix at 8's the biggest shocker. I think a lot of it's been predictable. I think the fact that no defensive players went until the 15th pick is historically shocking. John, the player that I worry about, Amarius Mims at Cincinnati, is one of those where I'm a little gun shy. Guy's got no starts. That worries me. In a division with excellent pass rushes, that worries me. That's a good defensive division.
I'd say the pick that and I know they had to do it, but Drake Maye, first-time head coach, who's young, who's been coaching for 5 years, who was a player 7 years ago, who has all this negativity surrounding the organization. That's a tough spot. We talk about some of these spots. Caleb's in a great spot. JJ's in a great spot. Bo Nix gets Sean Payton. Drake Maye gets Gerard Mayo, Jonathan Kraft, and no one around him. Gronkowski and Edelman ain't walking through that door.
Oh no, it is lean. I mean, it's Devontae Parker. Is Juju Smith-Schuster still there?
The conference is good. Think of all the quarterbacks in that conference. That's tough. Now technically they got Jacoby Brissett. He doesn't have to start right away, but you go 1-5. Who the hell is going to want to watch Jacoby Brissett? So this guy's going to get thrown in the fire. It always happens, and I like him.
Yeah, I do think New England's O-line's okay. So my guess is New England goes heavy tight end receiver back, because they went big interior. They went 3 guards last year. So the interior O-line.
I got another one, which again, the guy is a fantastic prospect, but Malik Neighbors of the Giants. They have Daniel Jones, who's awful, coming off an ACL, and DeVito. I mean, that's not going to work. I mean, when they drafted Odell Beckham, Eli could still play, and Eli always had a big arm. I mean, Neighbors is a down the field, stretch the field speed guy. Yeah. Daniel Jones is like a poor man's Alex Smith on his best day. I mean, it's this dinking and dunking. Yeah. So they don't have a quarterback. So this guy's a good player. I get why they drafted him, but the fit for the team, I don't know if that's really helping you this year.
I mean, it can't hurt. He's very much a yards after the catch guy. God, there's just so many good players.
There was that run of deep. Once the Colts went with Latu, the next top D lineman basically went in the next 4 picks. Murphy, Turner, then Mims, then Verse. So it's one of those things where they say you wait on the run, and then once the run starts, you got to get involved. It's kind of why Minnesota traded up right away, because they could see it coming.
What I'm really fascinated to watch is Bo Nix in Denver, because I literally think he went to the perfect coach. I think J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix have limitations. They literally landed in the perfect spot. Bo Nix is going to play immediately. At 61 college starts, they're not going to F around. They're going to play Bo Nix. They're not going to wait. I had Bo on my show for about 20 minutes, talked to him 10 minutes off the air before he came on and after. Bo's really smart. Bo's dad was a coach. He was a 5-star. Remember, he was a 5-star Southern recruit.
Remember his first start was against Oregon. Wasn't that game against Herbert? That was his first ever start. Remember that, like 2019 or 20?
I do.
And it was a fantastic game, came right down to the end.
He was a freshman.
I think he played really well in that game, and then it all kind of was downhill after that. True freshman. He was like 18 years old.
Yes, he was a freshman. I remember that game. And Auburn won late. And if I recall, Bo had a very good late drive to win the game for Auburn over Oregon. I remember that game.
Yeah, I'm not listen, I think he's overdrafted for the league, but I completely understand the fit with Sean Payton. And let's face it, you talk about this all the time, and anyone that follows football does. Where you go and who you fit with. You put Brock Purdy with Gerard Mayo. No one's talking about Brock Purdy. You put Brock Purdy with Kyle Shanahan. Matt Stafford was good no matter where he got. You get him to Sean McVay, it's lights out, right? So you get the hot Patrick Mahomes probably would have been okay. He gets with Andy Reid, all-time great. So Bo Nix definitely has a chance. Remember, Sean tried to do that pivot with Taysom, but Taysom couldn't throw the ball. But he wanted that athletic guy. Now he gets a quarterback that can move. Like this guy can throw. Taysom couldn't really.
Hey, Teddy Bridgewater went 5-0 backing up Breeze. Teddy is closer to a Bo Nix in terms of size, arm strength. So, I mean, Peyton's career is Breeze, Teddy Bridgewater. Bo Nix is the fit. I was told very early that he did prefer Bo Nix to Michael Penix. I was told that very early.
It's his offense more for sure. He's not running go routes.
Absolutely. No, I mean, listen, Shanahan like Kirk Cousins. A lot of these guys, they've got fits. I mean, like Kyle's very much tied to his play sheet. And by the way, so is Sean Payton. So is Lincoln Riley. Now, McVay isn't as much. LaFleur isn't as much. But some of these offensive guys have a play sheet. And that's why this year, Caleb with a bad O-line did a lot of ad-libbing out of Lincoln Riley's play sheet. And so USC has this kid, Miller Moss. He's going to follow the sheet, which I think Lincoln's
Well, I think Kevin O'Connell is really more of a disciple the way he thinks about football, more closer to Kyle and Sean than Sean Payton than Sean McVay. Who kind of Sean McVay's a little closer to Andy Reid, the way he wants to coach it and throw it. I'll tell you where to throw it. You get rid of the ball. The guy will be open. If he's not, go quick to the other guy. If not, just get rid of the ball and we'll just call another play. So I would imagine Kyle Shanahan, Sean Payton, obviously Kevin O'Connell, the JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, just play under control, high completion percentage, and do what I tell you and be a smart, high character guy. This type of guys they like. And again, it's depending on what Andy Reid wants to go deep, right? That's historically what he likes to do. So he likes a certain type quarterback, Donovan McNabb, Michael Vick, or Patrick Mahomes with a big arm. What makes him so special is he can pivot no problem. You give him Alex Smith, he can win 11 games. Most guys kind of struggle once they find the middle ground.
All right, one more pick. We will have been on officially 2 hours. You know what, man? It's been great.
What's your guess on how many millions of people watched the first hour of this thing with these quarterbacks? 25?
Oh, I think this will be the most watched draft easily, and my guess is it will beat the NBA games tonight.
Oh, it'll destroy them
significantly. Yeah, hammer them. My guess last year had 11 million viewers between the two networks. I thought it was. My guess it'll be closer to 13. Now, again, Lakers do have an audience. New York and LA are playing NBA.
It'll be the first hour because you had Chicago dialed in, Washington. I mean, these are massive markets, right? Boston, the Giants, all in the top. I bet the top 6, like that first 45 minutes of the draft, I'm sure it was when it peaked.
All right, Dallas is traded the pick. We have been freaking on it tonight. We predicted Dallas would trade the pick. And so the Cowboys traded to the Detroit Lions. And so how many did they drop? 4 spots? 3 spots?
Yeah, Lions would be picking 29.
Okay. So have they already made their selection? So let's just stick around for what Detroit
one
drafts.
thing that worked when I was with the Eagles, my first year, I got sent to Radio City Music Hall, and it was cool. You remember when the draft was there forever? This traveling circus thing they got going feels like a bigger event, doesn't it, with all these people? I mean, it pops on television.
They had 150,000 people at this 2 hours before.
That's remarkable.
That's what it I mean, that doesn't even make sense. That's like the Obama speech in Chicago. It's like, what?
This move by the NFL league office, Raj, has been genius. It changed the way
All right,
Detroit they take.
Terrion Arnold, cornerback, absolute need. Jeff Okudah, a couple years ago at Ohio State, was a kind of a bust. So not a surprise at all. They go corner. Again, the Amarius Mims, Cincinnati, a little concerning for me. It's a bit of a risk. He didn't play much. Outside of that, kind of predictable. I mean, so let's go back and review. Michael Penix to Atlanta is the shock of the draft. We were talking Bo Nix Denver a month ago.
People have connected that dot.
It may be a reach, but
JJ McCarthy to Minnesota. I think the only thing shocking there is that Minnesota didn't have to trade too far up, and they ended up coming out of this draft with both their picks, and they got JJ McCarthy and Dallas Turner. They got to feel pretty good about that.
This has been fun, buddy.
Enjoyed it. How do you beat the first round of the NFL draft?
Oh my God. This is adult video, adult entertainment for John and I. This is Only thing missing was a cocktail. Jesus. All right, I'll be on FS1 tomorrow. John Middlekauff, 3 and Out. Buddy, we were going to go 40 minutes. We're 2 hours in.
We got the second and third round tomorrow,
Dallas
Colin. So all the podcasts out Friday night.
See you, buddy.